Hi there, welcome to this week's edition of The Front Page. It is a bumper edition too, with loads to talk about, including controversy in Paris, a new marketing campaign for British race, and a red hot week for Aidan O'Brien, and bad news, more bad news I'm afraid, for leading rider Kieran Shoemark. To discuss things with me, Lee Mottershead, I'm joined by Race of Boats colleagues Chris Cook and Liam Head. Hello gentlemen.
Hey,
Hello. We weren't going to start this week's programme with Kieran Shoemark, who early last week lost his role as the number one rider to John and Thady Gosden, following what John described as the ramifications of Field of Gold's defeat in the 2000 Guineas, which we discussed on last week's programme. So we were going to move this further down the order in today's show, but then Longchamp happened yesterday, and in the Poule d'Essai des Pouliches, Kieran Shoemark, riding She's Perfect, just finished first past the post on that Charlie Fellows trained filly, beating the Aga Khan Studs owned Zaragana. But then the bing bong went, and a steward's inquiry and an objection by Zaragana's jockey Michael Barcelona resulted in She's Perfect being demoted to second and Zaragana being awarded the race, and thereafter there was heartache for the She's Perfect connections, including the Basher Watts led syndicate who expressed their displeasure in the Longchamp parade ring. Chris, so
I feel like we should say to Kieran, who obviously is going to be watching, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. So
yeah, and there's also that thing of nobody really wants to be the object of sympathy, in the sense that
that's the worst. Yeah, if you're a sports person.
Absolutely, he's a top-end sports person, a competitive athlete, and nobody wants people to be saying, "Oh, poor Kieran, poor Kieran."
Right.
But as you expressed in your piece in today's Racing Post, if what was to happen at Longchamp yesterday was to happen to anyone but, it would be anyone but Kieran Shoemark, because he didn't deserve that.
No, absolutely. I think we'd have all been delighted if he'd got the win, and it looked like he had on a horse that didn't have the most obvious chance. What was she returned 18-1? She's Perfect. Yeah. I was watching the race and thinking, he's absolutely made the most of this horse's chance. Went off in front, judged the pace nicely, and he's just run into a little bit of trouble where she's got tired in the home straight and she's wandered a bit to the left unexpectedly, and he's straightened her up, but the damage is done. I wouldn't quarrel with what the stewards did. I know that lots of people are saying, "Oh, this is a home decision. This is French stewards promoting the French favourite to victory." But honestly, if that same thing had happened at Leicester and I was on the second past the post, I'd be hoping and expecting that the stewards would intervene, because She's Perfect did move into slightly the path of the Ryan Moore ridden exactly, who then bumped Zaragana, whose jockey, unrelated to that, then dropped his whip and ended up smacking his mount down the neck repeatedly to the final few strides. I mean, Michael Barcelona did not cover himself in glory there. I think you'd have to say that Kieran Shoemark, though it hasn't worked out for him, has ridden a much better race.
Yeah.
Lots of us were watching Barcelona at the turn for home because he's on the horse with a big
Absolutely.
reputation.
Yeah.
And he does that thing for at least a few strides where you really want him to be moving forward, but he's sitting chilly because he knows he's on a classy animal, and he's put her in the situation where she needs a clear run to get forward and win the race. Yeah. And she didn't get it. And I mean, their connections have just got to count themselves lucky that she got close enough that it was possible for the stewards to say, well, we can change this result. But I mean, that horse should have won 2 lengths, shouldn't it? And there should have been no need for any chat about what's the right thing for the stewards to do.
From what you're saying, Chris, you would not be recommending Basher Watts and Charlie Fellows to be lodging an appeal against this one? Or would you? Well, because you never know what might happen.
Yeah, I think it's arguable enough that if they have the money, I don't think it's a cheap process.
Okay.
But if they have the money, why not give it a spin, because you might get lucky. I mean, I wouldn't be overly cynical about the French officials. I think you'll get a fair hearing.
Well, that's
but I think once the decision on the day has gone against you, that makes you odds against.
And surely you almost need to find a way to show that what they decided was wrong.
Clearly wrong.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that, isn't it?
Very difficult. Whereas if the stewards on the day had let her keep it, then that would probably withstand an appeal as well, I think. It's a very arguable situation, but I think the right result was reached for me.
And on that point then, we should say that Stuart Riley wrote a really engaging piece from Longchamp where he painted a picture of the reaction within that entourage of She's Perfect afterwards, and there were apparently cries of cheat and disgrace, and there was none of that, was there? It's a perfectly legitimate decision to take. They were upset, but that really wasn't on.
I think so. I let people get caught up in the moment, emotions run high, and drink has been taken. So, you'd like to think that those guys the next day will be feeling a bit calmer about it. It's a really difficult thing to go through, where you think you've won, punched miles above your weight, and had a really big day, and then it gets taken away from you. But they've still got a high quality filly who's still won a large amount of prize money, and there will be other days to come. It reminds you a little bit about Jacqueline Quest. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
First past the post in the Guineas must be 15 years ago for Noel Martin, and quite correctly got demoted because she did take special duty halfway across the track. But that takes it away from Noel Martin, who'd had tragedy and just dreadful things happen in his life, and the result instead goes to Judd Munt, who've had lots and lots of big days. So.
Well, not only that, I've just penned my members' diary for tonight. I was actually at Longchamp 2 weeks later when Special Duty, who won the 1,000 guineas in the stewards' room, then won the French 1,000 guineas in the stewards' room. Imagine that, a classic winner who wins 2 classics on both occasions in the stewards' room. So he went against Kieran Shoemark yesterday, Liam, and clearly that was a double blow. Bear in mind what had happened to him earlier in the week. What was your take on the Gosdens' decision to not remove him from the yard, but relegate him to one of many now riding their nice horses?
Yeah, it was obviously a difficult one for Kieran to take, but it was such a big role and responsibility to start off with. Anyone replacing Frankie Dettori in that role, you were anything could have happened. And it wouldn't have taken much for any criticism to come in. We know how tough it is to sort of get a role in this sport. More often than not, there's bad days more than there is good days. But those good days are obviously at the pinnacle of the sport. So for Kieran, it's obviously very disappointing that he's lost that sort of number one spot. John Gosden and Teddy Gosden have said that he still will be used as a jockey, but they're using the best available when it comes, and we've seen over the last sort of few days, William Buick's been used on rides. Colin Keane's been used before, so it'll be interesting to see where. Obviously, we're coming into sort of the pinnacle of the flat season now. Royal Ascot around the corner, so it'll be interesting to see who gets sort of jocked up on these big horses. For Kieran himself, it's obviously been tough to take, but now the pressure's off a little bit. The weight is off his shoulders. Hopefully we'll be able to see sort of the quality of his riding skills, which he is a brilliant rider. So hopefully now he's sort of been sort of let go a little bit more to sort of ride for other trainers. We'll see the very best of him. And
we should make the point as well, Kieran is not the first jockey that Team Gosden has had an issue with. Remember, it's not that long ago when Frankie was their number one rider. Remember there was that sabbatical period when he was
really
off the main
rocky,
horse,
wasn't it, after Royal Ascot
he was
time.
back on. But I was going to make the point, Chris, that when you're someone like Kieran Shoemark at his sort of level, and you make a high-profile mistake, it can be harder to recover from that than if you are someone like Michael Barcelona, who is a more established part of the upper league of riders, who I think by common consent would not look back on his ride yesterday on Zaragana and say that was one of my best performances. And yet one would imagine he will continue in that role. There might be words spoken, who knows? But you don't imagine it's going to impact his future career, whereas one mistake by Kieran Shoemark might well have done.
Because those guys, especially like Ryan Moore, Frankie Dettori, they've got decades behind them where they can point to, okay, so this wasn't great, but remember all those, remember my hits, basically. And that was one of the things I feared when Kieran was promoted to this job, is that he didn't have that kind of backstory. He wasn't established, in the top 10. And therefore, he's got it's like he was having to prove himself every week. And it's hard to live like that. It's interesting to see how he reacted to yesterday, from the quotes that he gave. He came across really well. He came across in quite a sort of phlegmatic manner.
The thing is, he always comes across really well, doesn't he? He's such an impressive young man.
I'm pleased for him if he is able to cope with it, because I think for an awful lot of people that would be quite difficult to get your head around, having 2 weekends like that. But I mean, yesterday, let's face it, he's overperformed on 2 Charlie Fellows horses, the 2 of them working together, because they had Luther, who was, I think, 4th in the boys race in France at a big price. And in that same race, Shoemark would have been on Detain if he hadn't lost his gig with the Gosdens. And Detain, was Colin Keane was at the road, has ended up, giving his backers quite a frustrating run, because he was out the back in a race where a bunch of them went clear, and never really got into it nearest at the finish. I would say he's a victim of circumstance. I wouldn't be, criticising the jockey for that.
But some might.
But if Shoey had been in the saddle and
Absolutely.
had delivered that ride, he definitely would have been taking flack on social media.
That race, Liam, was won by Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore, Henri Matisse, and even by Aidan O'Brien standards, the week just gone was pretty. But there's so many wins that I've had to write them all down. I won't remember them all. Chester Vars, Cheshire Oaks, Lingfield Derby Trial, Lingfield Oaks Trial, Leopardstown's Derby Trial, that Poule d'Essai des Poulains, and back at Chester, the Ormond and the Hoxley Stakes. So Aidan O'Brien basically wins everything last week. In particular, wins all those Derby Trials and Oaks Trials. So we had Lambourne, we had Mount Kilimanjaro, we had Mini Hawk, we had Giselle, we had Delacroix yesterday, we had the Noce winner too, whose name escapes me. Do any of those horses win classics at Epsom?
I like the Mini Hawk. I like the way she won. She won her race at Chester. Really took the race, stepping up and trip really well. I think she could be a genuine Oaks contender.
Okay, more Southern Giselle. I like Giselle more.
Giselle, yeah, but I just think it will be interesting to see who, if they both turn up, who Ryan Moore decides to go for. But for Aidan O'Brien and his team, he couldn't have asked for a better week.
Yeah, especially the week before.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And going into obviously a big week at York, we'll see the Lion in Winter as well come out. Hopefully in the Dante. It couldn't have gone any better for him. Nice to have a Lambourne winner.
Yes, good point. Yeah. See what you did there.
I do like the name. I think one of our colleagues, Andrew Dietz, did ask about the name, but I think they were keeping the cards close to the chest about that one. So we might have a Lambourne winner in the Derby, maybe.
Yeah,
it should really be an Ed Walker horse, shouldn't it, or a Jamie Osborne?
Yeah. It is interesting, but
be a bit cheeky if they named something Ballydoyle, wouldn't it?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I think someone would say something about that, but. Fantastic week at Chester and over the weekend as well, and he's just an unbelievable trainer, isn't he?
So this is something I've been writing about: is what's the right route to the Derby, and what's the one that works?
Yeah.
Because I think sort of still residually, lots of British race fans think the Dante is the one, but I don't think Aidan has ever won a Derby with a horse that's running the Dante. So what he's trying to do with the Lion in Winter, is unprecedented. The line always used to be from him that it just comes a bit close to the race.
But there's an extra week this year.
Yeah, it is 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It has quite often been 3 in the past. Sometimes it's
one of those 3 week years. Yeah.
But I think even when it was 3, his feeling was he'd rather get the prep run out of the way, with a week in hand, just in case there was some little bump in the road.
Yeah.
Japan was one that I think went to the Dante because he'd been held up along the way.
Yeah.
And I realise that all the noises that come are positive about this horse that's going to run in the Dante this week, but it does make you think a little bit. Maybe this isn't Plan A or even Plan B. Weirdly, the race that's worked for him as a Derby prep is the Guineas. He had Camelot and then Auguste Rodin and City of Troy.
Yeah.
I think that's it. There's 3 horses that ran in the Guineas and then went and won the Derby.
But it won't work for him this year.
Well, evidently not. But so I was watching Delacroix, and of course he won, didn't he? Because I'd meant to back him for the Derby beforehand at 7 or 8 to 1. Didn't. Just kept getting distracted by work. And of course he's won. And I was thinking, well, what's he beat? They'll leave him at the same price. But they halved him, didn't they?
Of course they did.
And he's nearly the same price now as the favourite.
Yeah. Of the 2, which would you prefer to be on?
Well, so Delacroix, because he's proved it, right?
Okay,
and
the other
you know,
way.
with the other one, it's 9 months since you saw him.
Yeah, but you see that form at York. I love the way he strode out at York in the Acomb Stakes. Looked like a Derby winner waiting to happen.
He absolutely did, but I mean, what's happened since?
Well, not a lot, nothing.
But anyway, so with that in mind, starting to develop some enthusiasm about Delacroix, I was like, I looked at the whole Ballysacks Derrenstein.
Yes.
Wait, it's not Derrenstein anymore, is it? Cashel Palace.
Yes.
It's gone to the Derby trial. Because that was so sexy for a while, wasn't it? Sindar nearly did the double.
Yeah.
High Chaparral, Galileo.
Yeah.
No horse since High Chaparral has won those 2 races and then won the Derby. In fact, that whole time, which is like 23 years.
And in the front runner, you rattle off a list of ones that tried and didn't.
Harzan won the Ballysacks and went straight to the Derby, and that worked. But I don't think there's been a winner of the Derby trial at Leopardstown that's followed up in the Derby, which kind of cools your jets a little, or it does for me.
Okay.
Because there's something about those races that can make a horse look good. Bolshoi Ballet being the most recent example. And we all get carried away, and then it goes wrong. You've got to remember, don't you, the number of things, really of an impressive array of things that can go wrong for a Derby runner. And is that built into 4-1 Delacroix? Clearly not.
Well, on that positive note, let's move on to Ascot on Saturday. A couple of things to talk about there. First of all, I'd almost forgot to say, Celestial King, 1.75 million guineas purchase by Ammo at the Breeze Ups last month. Made his debut at Ascot on Saturday, finished 4th, beating just over 5 lengths. Liam, would you, if you're watching that, would you still say, okay, money could still be well spent?
Well, it could be. I mean, we can't just judge them off.
No, one run.
On one run.
There you go.
So
could still be.
You've been well trained by these bloodstock agents.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So 2 runs maybe.
Yeah.
But no, it'll be interesting to see where the horse progresses from here. But Ascot was a brilliant day on Saturday. Good crowd in the sunshine, and a bit of history as well.
Explain.
With Hollie Doyle notching her 1023rd winner. So she now becomes the most successful female jockey in Britain, overtaking Hayley Turner. So fantastic for her. I mean, she's just as John Gosden. I spoke to John Gosden after she won it over the weekend, and he just described her as the perfect role model, which she is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she was brilliant. You know, but the great thing is with her is that she's just looking for the next. You know, she's looking to set that bar even higher. So, you know, full credit to her and the team around her.
But, in a little segue to bring us to end in part 1, Chris, we had a press release pop through this morning.
Oh, I love press releases.
You love press releases, and you love this
3
one.
stories, I call them.
This one, viewers, got him animated. Hollie Doyle is to captain a team at this year's Dubai duty-free Shergar Cup.
How exciting. It must be the ladies' team, is it, Lee?
Do you know, it's not.
What?
The reason why, the reason why is the ladies' team is no more.
Oh
been
my
replaced
God.
by Team Asia, and Hollie now captains GB and Ireland. Would it be fair to say...
Are they really, they're doing that, or are they putting Britain together with Ireland? Okay.
I'm just going to go back
Because
to
some
the
might
press
say
release.
that the rivalry between Britain and Ireland can be fruitful in racing circles.
Leading will make a 4th captain GB and Ireland on August.
Great.
Would it be fair to say that you were not overly enthused by this decision? Go on, open your heart.
I
Let it all
realise
out.
that not many people will care.
Not many, no,
but
but you do.
It just seems to be such an obvious own goal. So it's tremendously kitsch, isn't it? The whole Shergar Cup. You know, they have cheerleaders.
Yeah, wonderful.
And,
Kitsch,
you know,
camp, flamboyant, everything.
And they have a
Fantastic.
ladies team, and they all wear pink. And it's, you know, but it so works since they invented that girls team. And I think they won 4 times at the last 6 Shergar
They win it
Cup.
pretty much every year, don't they?
And you get a big crowd of like once-a-year racegoers, lots of families, lots of kids, and you know, roughly 50% of them end up cheering for the girls' team, and they have a great time. And you know, when Hayley and Hollie win races, or Emma Jane Wilson from Canada, she's so charismatic. You know, the roof nearly comes off, and the crowd can be bigger than you get for King George Day, and everyone has a great time. So it's obviously not for your established racing fan. In fact, I know from lots of contact over the years that most of them hate it.
They're all watching the Rose of Lancaster and the Sweet Solera.
Exactly, that's the specialist racing for that weekend. But the Shergar Cup worked as it was, and here we are trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. It was such an easy win as well in terms of getting coverage outside of racing's usual space. Because everybody loves a battle of the sexes, right? I mean, it's just the easiest thing ever to take a position on. And I can't believe they're giving up such an easy win.
He can't believe it, Liam. He's really angry. He's upset.
He is.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Maybe angry is going too far, but...
Are you more I think you're angry. Always angry. So
right.
Angry. Are you more pot about it?
Well, I mean, I can see why they're making the change. They're trying to integrate both male and female on the same team.
Yeah.
But I do understand Chris's.
Well, you just saying that to make him
feel better. I don't want to get too close.
He's sitting next to me.
But what I would say is, like he touched on the ladies that have been successful. Safi Osborne obviously has been in that winning team before, and she had a nice winner at the weekend at Ascot.
Yeah, Victoria Cup
on her dad's horse, Jamie's horse, Hickory in the feature race. And she's obviously got a big week ahead.
Huge.
She's going to be partnering again, Jamie Osborne's Heart of Honour in the Preakness Stakes in Pimlico on Saturday night. She's only going to be the second female jockey in the race since Rosie Napravnik since 2014, and only the third European jockey in the past 25 years to ride in the race as well. So
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. I mean, even before she gets to the start line, it's a historic moment.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if the horse can go on and win the race, it'll be
wowzers.
Absolutely incredible.
She's not even up against the Kentucky Derby winner.
No, exactly.
Exactly.
So it's going to be an interesting race. Obviously, the horse was narrowly touched off just by nose in the UAE Derby last time. And for owners Jim and Claire Bryce, and for Jamie Osborne and Safi who rode him, you could sense that the heartbreak that they had that day. So if the horse can go and do one better, then it'd be huge.
It's not like Jamie just sends horses relentlessly over for these big American prizes for no reason. I mean, he got very close with Toast of New York.
He did, and I spoke to him last week for one of my Lambourne postcards, and like you said, he doesn't do this often, and when he has a good horse, he wants to utilise that opportunity. He obviously did it with Toast of New York. He went on an extraordinary journey in 2014, and this horse can hopefully take him to those heights again, and I think it'll be the first time that Safi's ever rode in America as well. So that's a great achievement.
Well, I'm glad she's had that confidence booster in the Victoria Cup as well. Because I think it's been a slow year so far. But I mean, just that sort of takes me back to the whole thing. That blooming press release said something about, we don't need to have this women's team anymore because women compete on equal terms. But I mean, it's not like that battle has been won. No. We've had some very successful female jockeys, but the numbers have not been feeding through. In the top 50 in flat racing in Britain so far this year, there's only Hollie, I think.
Aside from Rachel Blackmore, one female professional jockey had a ride at the Cheltenham Festival.
Is that right? Only one? Yeah. Well, so there's still an awful lot of ground to cover. I mean, it must be 10 years since the British Racing School was saying their apprentice licence course was 50% intake female. And that they have not been feeding through into the professional ranks for whatever reason. You can speculate. But I tend to think if equality of opportunity existed, we'd be seeing more women.
Okay, we're going to move on from that press release. Chris will have a damp flannel attached to his forehead. And when we return in part 2, we'll be telling about how British racing has spent £3.6 million on what? Return and find out. Welcome back to part 2 of The Front Page. Liam Head and Chris Cook joining me, Lee Mottershead, to rattle through some of last week's big news stories. And a big money news story came out towards the end of last week with news that British Racing will have its first national marketing campaign for some time, launching on May the 20th, which is Tuesday of next week, and running through to the autumn. The going is good. We'll seek to convince people with no real engagement with horse racing, or perhaps a lapsed interest in horse racing, or an occasional interest in horse racing, that a day at the races should be something for them to think about. It's come from £3.62 million of levy board funding. One of the taglines will be 4 million memories made every year, connecting that to the fact that 4.8 million people enjoy a day at the races. Sam Michaelides, who is the head of Great British Racing, the sports marketing wing, has said that there has been robust testing of the promotional advertising campaign, and the results are, he says, incredibly good, and he's incredibly confident about its potential. But Liam, I put to you that whilst we can't knock a campaign until we've seen it,
we can.
Chris, you find out that Chris can. The going is good. I'm not sure if you're not into racing, you'll necessarily understand that. Some might say, why is the going not great? There would be no, looking at what someone said to Bill Barber last week, there's no evidence at the minute of any metrics by which this is going to be measured a success or not. And when you're spending £3.6 million, that seems questionable. So close to the campaign's launch last week, there was no digital imagery available, which is questionable. And also, the sport has launched last year its biggest ever customer research campaign, Project Beacon. Now, on which Simon does sit, but isn't it a bit unusual or strange that you would launch your biggest ever marketing campaign before Project Beacon's findings have been made public and you've had enough time to properly assess them? And I think that is because I think that's happened because there's an awful lot of pressure on GBR from the industry to get something done this year. That's my take on it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you talk about pressure. I feel like this does add extra pressure because of you instantly think of the money that's been sort of laid out for this marketing campaign. We don't know what the results are from Project Beacon, like you said. So you almost, like in any sort of survey that's conducted, you almost need to see the results. Then you have to have a little time to conduct them and make changes to sort of implement them to make things better. So to be doing this without the full findings out of the last campaign it is a bit of an odd timing, but at the same time it is comforting to know that there is something being done to enhance the sort of future of the sport.
Your colleague here, who's been on form this show, you don't seem overly.
I thought maybe
about this
comforting was going a step further than personally I feel. That point you made about no digital imagery being available close to launch.
That was surprising, wasn't it?
Rings a bit of a bell from last year with the old Premier Racing. You'd like to think this one will maybe work a little bit better, but there's some form in the book to say that maybe the sport isn't brilliant at this kind of thing.
We can't really knock the promotion of Premier in the sense that there was no promotion of Premier.
Anyway, look, it's good that we've got 3.6 million left in the kitty to spend on something like this.
From the levy board?
Yeah. But it's isn't it our first national marketing campaign for 3 years?
Since the one with Jermaine Guineas, yeah.
I mean, 3.6 million, I would think most industries of our size would think that wouldn't even touch the sides. It's just the beginning of what you've got to do to try and get back the audience that you've probably that has withered away, never mind reaching new people. I wish, I hear them say something about, try to get back people who've been fans and have drifted off. I think that might be potentially the most fruitful area for this.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like whenever we talk about marketing racing, they're always reaching out to this imagined new audience that's out there. But I really think that it would be much more important for the time being to make sure that we're keeping the fans that we already have, maybe getting back some of the ones who've drifted away. It always used to be said that most racegoers each year only go one time per year, and if you could somehow convert most of those people into going twice per year, that would make a sort of significant contribution to the sport's finances. And so, why don't we push on that, and try and make better friends of the ones that we already have? I think there's a lot of scope for the sport to do things better in the way that it relates to those people. Particularly, and this is something I've talked about a lot, the race going experience. I mean, it's good. I've always enjoyed it. But we really do leave people to their own devices. And if you're not somebody who knows the sport all that well, you drift into the races, you watch the horses go by, the bouncy castle is there, face painting is over there, you buy a couple of drinks, whoops, that was expensive, and off home we go, maybe we'll come back next year. The sport has got to do something a little bit more active and aggressive in terms of directing people's attention and giving them the information that we know they will benefit from, drawing them into sort of games of predicting what's going to happen in each race. Drawing them into conversations about what went wrong or what went right for certain horses. We're far too laissez-faire, I think, with the people who show an active interest in our sport and then just get left alone. We've got to improve their knowledge each time they come to the races.
Well, is there for Liam a danger of this campaign? I've spoken to one person who has seen what they're doing, what they're putting out, and says it's actually very good. They think it's a decent campaign. But there was pressure on GBR to do something this year, which maybe explains why they've done it in advance of the public, the findings of Project Beacon going public, and maybe explains why it is a, if you like, generic catch-all loose campaign as opposed to the sort of focused marketing campaign that might have achieved what Chris was talking about. But I guess it would be positive, and we'd say we can't really knock something until we've seen it. Yeah. We're always moaning that British racing doesn't do enough to market itself, and if we're now having 3.6 million quid of marketing, then in one sense that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, on paper it looks like a very good thing, and reading from the outside and looking from the outside, you think, well, at least they're doing something. Yeah. And like you said, I suppose doing it, contrary to what I was saying before, doing it before the findings have come out, at least when the findings do come out, they can say, well, we're already sort of in the process of trying to make things better. Like Chris said before, I think it is very important, if not more important, to target those people that, like we've touched on, that may have been regular racegoers, that have fallen out of love with the sport, because they're ultimately the ones that, they're going to be coming back more regularly than those ones that come once a year.
It's sort of a head start, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know that they've been to the races. Yeah. It's all well saying to someone in the market research, so they're open to the idea of a day at the races. Yeah. They've actually been to the races. Yeah. You're one step further forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's more concerning losing those that have been time and time again than it is trying to attract new people in. It's a lot easier to draw people that have never been horse racing before. Like, you have your family days out, fun days and everything. It's easy to bring those people in, but it's keeping people in, actively, which is the big challenge.
If they go to the races, maybe a day at Stratford last week, they might wonder, where was that race that I was expected to see? But it's not there because it was removed in the BHA's race deletion policy. So just going to touch on this before we finish off. A couple of bits of stories. Trainers aren't happy. Really not happy about the whole policy really of getting rid of races. Class 4 to 6 handicaps on the flat, class 4 to 5 over jumps. They face the axe if receiving 3 or fewer declarations. That's what happened at Stratford. It meant that there were 2 divisions of what turned out to be a 6-runner race, which doesn't seem satisfactory either.
It's not a brilliant solution, is it?
No, so you don't like the
No, I must admit, I'm basically in favour of the idea that if a race hasn't worked, which I think is what it means when you get that few number of runners, it's not like some Gold Cup and you've decided you can't beat Galopin des Champs. These ought to be winnable races for a large number of horses if they've been programmed correctly. And if you only got 3 declared, then I completely understand why the BHA wants to just zap them out. Obviously it's upsetting and annoying for connections of those who wanted to have a go and thought they found a winnable opportunity, but I'm sorry that at that level, the sport has to be about generating entertainment and competition, and we need more than 3 runners for that.
Okay, so you're actually generally you understand the BHA's position on this.
I'd be behind them unless a better way forwards can be found.
Okay, and Liam, another story that we reported on last week, and this is really worrying. TBA chairman Philip Newton went public on the crisis linked to the foal crop in Britain, and it's also one there in Ireland. Numbers really down. Last year's foal crop in Britain was 4,198. As recently as 2022 was 4,601. The TBA's projection is that the 2026 crop will drop to a number that wasn't forecast to be reached until 2051, so a quarter of a century later. And the numbers are also going down in Ireland. Philip Newton warned that if this carries on, there basically won't be enough horses to service a fixture list. There will be declining levy in media rights, and racecourses will close. Really worrying the way these numbers are going down.
Yeah, just when you think we've got enough issues in the sport, something like this sort of report comes out. It is a concern because it is the future of the sport. It's what sort of carries everyone through. The level that the decrease is happening is a major concern, and obviously action needs to happen to try and prevent further, situations for, like you've mentioned, racecourses closing. So it is a major concern for what happens next, really.
And Chris, it's something that should focus attention on the way in which we need to change an awful lot of things in the sport to make it more commercially viable in the long term.
Yeah, it is very troubling because you sort of think a trend like this, it can sort of develop a momentum of its own, can't it? I mean, you read a guy like Colin Bryce talking in the paper last week about how medium-sized breeders, lots of them, are like one bad sail away from oblivion. And that was the quote that stayed with me. And I don't think of him as being alarmist at all. That there must be lots of people who are living like that, and enough of them go. You've got a real sort of narrowing of the sport's raw material. I always worried about the fact that the officials at the centre of the sport never seem to be taking active responsibility for ensuring a supply chain of horses into the sport. My thought was in terms of jump racing. Where is the action being taken to make sure that we've got enough jumps horses to support the fixture list that we've got? Instead, what we've done over years is create all of this bountiful all-weather racing, which is competes directly for horses with jumps racing, and nothing is done about that. Anyway, here we have a similar situation. I don't have a ready solution. I don't know what can be done, but clearly attention needs to be paid to it. You can't just let this take care of itself.
That then is pretty much our show. I think we've covered a lot of ground there, haven't we, gentlemen?
Sure. We didn't try and pick the Derby winner, but
who wins the Derby?
Well, I mean, I've said Delacroix, haven't I?
Okay.
But I'm just wrong about that.
I'm
arguing with myself.
I'm still the line in winter. You're with?
I'd probably say Delacroix on the basis of what we've seen so far. The Lion in Winter could completely bolt up in the dance and you could change my mind, but I was...
Do you know what is worrying me slightly is that it looks like being a straight Ballydoyle versus Godolphin fight. I mean, I'm not sure who else is going to be involved. Hopefully something, maybe 2 or 3 will come out of the Dante that we would have a chance for somebody else. We need a little bit of breadth and variety, don't we, in our classics.
2-1 to Delacroix. I'm with the line in winter. There will be much more Derby chat between now and the big day on this programme. Thank you for watching. Thanks to Chris and to Liam. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.